The man stumbled out of the brush like a ghost, shirt torn, lips cracked from thirst, arms trembling as he clutched a blood-soaked burlap sack to his chest. His boots dragged in the dirt, leaving crooked tracks in the dying light. The desert wind howled low like it was trying to warn someone, anyone. Silas Boone had seen a lot in his 50 years. Cattle torn by wolves, men shot through the neck, even a woman burned alive in her own home. But the way the stranger collapsed at his horse's hooves made something twist hard in his gut. The children behind him, Millie and Toby, froze. Their eyes widened. The man lifted his head, blood running from his nose. His voice cracked like dry wood. "Please, not in front of the children." Then he went limp, just like that, like a string had been cut. Silas dismounted slow. Dust curled around his boots. He knelt beside the sack, fingers trembling as he pulled at the knot. The fabric clung wet to itself before finally giving way. And then, silence. Inside, a child's cracked doll with straw hair, broken wire-rim glasses, and a single small shoe soaked through with blood. The smell hit first. Copper, fear, and something older. Millie let out a whisper. "That's Ellie's doll." Her voice was barely there, but Silas heard it clear as a gunshot. Ellie, the little girl who went missing 2 weeks ago, vanished from her own bed without a sound. Folks said she ran away. Silas never believed it. He rose slow, staring off at the horizon, the wind tugging at his coat. Toby looked up at him. "Pa, what do we do?" Silas didn't speak. Not yet. He wrapped the sack tight, slung it over his saddle like something sacred. Then he lifted the dead man's body, laid it across the horse without a word. The sun dipped behind the ridge, casting the world in blood-red light. Silas finally spoke, his voice dry as bone. "We ride." And in that moment, something anged in the air, like the land itself knew justice was waking from its long, bitter sleep. The tracks were thin, shallow hoofprints barely pressed into the dry crust of earth. Most men would have missed them, but Silas wasn't most men. He'd tracked wounded steers across dust storms, found lost calves in rattlesnake canyons. This trail, this one had desperation written in every staggered step. The wind picked up, cruel and hot. Grit danced across the trail, trying to erase the past like it always did in these parts. But Silas pressed on, his hat low, eyes locked ahead, boots crunching steady through the wasteland. Behind him, the sack swayed from the saddle, a reminder, a warning, a promise. Narration flickered through his memory. The night Millie burst through the front door 2 weeks ago, crying that Ellie was gone. Her stepfather, Jedediah Kane, said she ran off, drunk, slurring, no search party, no urgency, just a shrug and a bottle. But Silas remembered the bruises on Ellie's arms, the way she flinched when men got too loud. He remembered, and he believed the girl, not the man. A coyote yelped in the distance. The sun was high now, burning down. Silas paused to water the horse. That's when he saw it. A gully ahead, rimmed with cracked rock. Sand shimmered like water. It wasn't. Quicksand. He tested it with a stick. It swallowed whole. "Clever bastard," he muttered. The tracks veered sharp at the last moment. Someone had tried to lure whoever followed straight into death. He led the horse around wide. Just beyond the gully, a ribbon lay tangled on a mesquite branch. Faded blue, frayed edges. Silas reached for it like it was made of glass, tied it around his wrist. Same one Ellie wore to church every Sunday. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. Up ahead, a gnarled oak rose crooked from the earth like a finger pointing at God, and pinned into its bark with a thorough Bowie knife was another sign. A child's bonnet, pale pink, speckled with dried blood, carved into the tree, just beneath the blade, J.C. Silas stared at the initials until the wind stilled. The devil had signed his work, and Silas Boone had just accepted the invitation. The cabin lay hidden beneath a ridge of dead pines, a crooked thing, slumped against the land like it was ashamed to stand. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin and steady. A buzzard circled high above. That was enough for Silas to slip his rifle from the saddle and move quiet. He tied the horse to a mesquite and crept forward, boots soft in the dust. The front door groaned on its hinges when he pushed it open, and the first thing that hit him was the smell. Piss, sweat, and rot. And then he saw her. Ellie. Tied to a chair in the corner, wrists red raw from rope, eyes swollen, lips split. She looked like something left too long in the sun, but she was breathing. Barely. Her head jerked when the door creaked. She flinched, bracing for the worst. "No," Silas said gently. "It's all right, little one. You're safe now." Her voice rasped like sandpaper. "Is he here?" Silas shook his head. "Not anymore." He moved slow, cutting the ropes with a bowie knife, hands trembling despite himself. Ellie collapsed into his arms, bones like paper under skin. "Can you ride?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'll carry you then." He wrapped her in his coat, lifting her like she weighed nothing. She clutched something to her chest, the broken doll from the sack. Her eyes never left the door. But before they could leave, the sound of hooves cracked through the air like thunder. Silas froze, set her down gently, peeked through the slats. A lone rider. Black horse, black duster, face like stone. He rode past slow, scanning the trees. A bottle swung from his saddle horn. His lips moved, talking to himself, or maybe to the wind. Inside, Ellie buried her face in Silas's chest, whispering, "He talks to Mama like she's still alive. Mama's bones are in the well." Silas didn't blink. He carried her down into the root sea. Lar pulled the trapdoor shut just as Kane circled back toward the cabin. Above them, floorboards creaked. Jed's boots thumped. He spat on the wood, voice slurred but dark. "She ain't gonna get far, not this time." Silas held Ellie tighter and waited. The wind had shifted by the time Silas mounted again. Ellie wrapped tight against his chest. Dust streaked the horizon like fire, the last light of day spilling across the ridges. Every nerve in his body screamed to ride faster, but he kept control, letting the horse find its own rhythm over the rough terrain. Ellie stirred, weak and shivering. "Will he come back?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the creak of the saddle. Silas glanced down, jaw tight. He might, but not tonight. Not ever again. His words were firm, but inside a storm of worry raged. He knew Jedediah Kane, cruel, cunning, and drunk on his own evil. He didn't forgive. He hunted. The children, Millie and Toby, were waiting at the ranch, faces pressed to the fence. Relief and fear tangled on their features as Silas rode up, the horse slowing to a weary trot. Ellie's eyes widened and she weakly reached for Millie's hand. "Ellie," Millie breathed, I thought you were gone." Silas dismounted, setting Ellie gently on the ground. "She's here, safe, for now," he said, scanning the tree line. Shadows shifted. Every rustle of leaves could be Kane returning. That night the ranch seemed alive with tension. Lanterns swung softly in the breeze, casting long shadows over the corrals. Silas stood guard near the barn, rifle in hand, eyes never leaving the horizon. The children slept under blankets close to the warmth of the fireplace, unaware of the danger that stalked beyond the fence. Far off, Jed scoured the countryside. He kicked at dirt and spit. Empty cabin, empty trails. Boone thinks he's clever. He spat again, dark eyes glinting under his hat. "You want a war, Boone? You got one." Back at the ranch, Silas's fingers tightened around the rifle. The smell of smoke and dust mixed with the faint scent of Ellie's hair, still damp from the sweat and dirt of the day. He whispered to himself, a vow as much to the wind as to the girl. "You won't touch them. Not here. Not ever." Moonlight stretched across the corral, highlighting the tense lines of Silas's face. Every creak of the barn door, every whisper of wind through the trees reminded him Cain would not give up. He never did. But neither would Silas Boone, not while he had breath and not while the children still looked to him for protection. The horizon burned red, a silent promise of what was to come, confrontation, reckoning, and the long, desperate ride toward justice. Dawn broke over the ranch like molten gold spilling across the dusty hills. Silas leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed, eyes narrowing at the horizon. The night had been long, every shadow a potential threat, every rustle of leaves a whispered warning. A dust cloud appeared on the trail, slow at first, then gaining speed. Silas's hand hovered over his rifle. He recognized the gate before the man even drew close. Sheriff Ulysses Granger rode into view, a stoic figure on a gray horse, badge dulled by sun and years of service. His boots thumped against the stirrups, lantern in hand, swinging like a pendulum. "Boone," Granger said, voice low but firm. "I heard the story. Thought I'd see for myself." Silas didn't speak immediately. He led the sheriff toward the porch, eyes still scanning the tree line. Ellie clutched Millie's hand, watching silently. "She's safe now," Silas finally said. "But Cain, he's coming. He's clever. And he's cruel." Granger dismounted, eyes locking onto Ellie. "Tell me everything, girl." Every word he said, every mark he left. Ellie's voice was trembling but steady. He beat me, starved me. I thought he'd kill me. He said I'd never see anyone again if I tried to run." She paused, tears rolling down her cheeks. I'm scared he'll come back." Granger put a hand on Silas's shoulder. "We'll see that he doesn't. You did right, Boone. The law's on your side now, but listen, the Cain boys ride deep. They don't come quiet." Silas nodded, jaw tight. "I know. That's why we prepare." The morning was thick with tension. Silas began boarding up the barn, hammer in hand, nails biting wood. Toby fetched planks, hands shaking but determined. The sound of construction, hammer striking wood, boards scraping, was a small defiance against the quiet terror outside. Ellie placed her broken doll beside the fireplace, staring at it as if willing it to carry strength. Millie sat beside her, brushing her hair gently, whispering, "We'll keep her safe." Granger watched them, then tipped his hat toward Silas. "Stay sharp. I'll ride out and gather deputies. You don't have to face this alone." Silas looked to the horizon, sun climbing higher. The desert wind rustled the dry brush. Somewhere out there, Jedediah Cain was planning. But Silas Boone would be ready, and this time he wouldn't let the devil win. The ranch breathed again, uneasy but alive, a fragile shield of hope under the morning light. And in that fragile glow, Silas vowed, come what may, no harm would touch the children on his watch. Night fell like a curtain of ash over the ranch. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and sweat, the shadows long and twitching under the lanterns Silas had hung along the porch and fence line. Every creak of wood, every rustle of leaves, made the hairs on his neck stand on end. From the ridge, torches flickered like fireflies. Silas spotted them first. 4 riders, moving silent and deliberate. The moon caught their steel, glinting off the edges of knives and rifles. Jedediah Cain and his brothers. "Here they come," Silas muttered, loading the shotgun with a practiced hand. Toby stood beside him, trembling, fists tight on his rifle. Millie and Ellie huddled inside, eyes wide, clutching each other and the remnants of courage they still had. The first horse hit the fence line with a loud crash, tossing splinters into the dry earth. Jed's voice carried over the wind, rough and cruel. "Hand her over, Boone, or I'll burn every last thing you own." Silas took aim, the glow of his lantern catching in his eyes. "Not tonight. Not ever again," he said, voice steady as steel. The Cain brothers pressed forward, torches swinging, throwing sparks into the dark. They lit the barn on fire, flames licking at the timbers. The sound of crackling wood and panicked animals filled the night. A Molotov smashed into the water trough, sending water and fire flying. The air was thick, acrid, burning in their throats. Silas fired, bullets snapping through the darkness. One of Cain's brothers toppled, screaming, clutching a bleeding arm. Jed roared, slamming his fist against the porch post. "You think you can hide, Boone?" Ellie shrank under the staircase, clutching her broken doll to her chest. Millie whispered, "It's okay. He's here." Shots rang out in the night, echoes bouncing across the hills. The children's hearts pounded with terror, every beat a drum of dread. But Silas stood firm, every muscle coiled, every breath deliberate. The standoff stretched, torches flaring, shadows dancing like demons across the land. Then a brother tried to climb the porch. A single shot rang, and he went down with a grunt, sprawled on the splintered boards. Jed's scream cut through the chaos. "You'll wish you handed her over." But Silas didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Not this night, not ever. The fight had begun, and the ranch, bloodied and burning, would see it through to the bitter end. The night air was thick with smoke, the ranch burning low under the torchlight. Silas crouched behind the fence, rifle steady, heart hammering in his chest. Toby's hands shook, but he reloaded anyway, jaw tight, eyes wide. Every shadow seemed alive, every flicker of light a threat. Sheriff Granger's lantern bobbed on the ridge. "Hold your fire until you see the whites of their eyes," he called, voice slicing through the chaos. His deputies spread, flanking the Cain brothers from both sides. The tide turned fast. Two of Jed's brothers fell, thudding into the dust, groaning, their screams swallowed by the desert night. One stumbled away, wounded, bleeding onto the rocks. Jed's face twisted, rage and fear battling behind his dark eyes. He swung his horse toward the ranch, fists tight on the reins. "Boone, you'll pay for this!" Silas rose from his cover, rifle in hand, voice like iron. "Not tonight, not ever again." The air smelled of gunpowder and fire, a bitter taste of justice. Bullets whipped through the night, sparks dancing where they hit wood and stone. Every shot counted, deliberate and merciless. Inside the house, Ellie clutched her doll to her chest, Millie's hand tight around hers. They could hear it all. The shouts, the screams, the thud of bodies hitting the ground. Fear wrapped around them, but Silas's presence was a shield, a wall they could not see but could feel. Jed slammed into the barn gate, striking with a crowbar, fury in every movement. Silas waited, heart hammering, finger on the trigger. Just as Cain reached the porch, deputies closed in from the flank. Granger's voice was a thunderclap. "Hold it! Stop!" Jed froze, eyes wild. A deputy stepped forward, rifle leveled. He faltered, looking at Silas, at the burning barn, at the bodies of his brothers. "You think you can take me?" he spat, voice trembling. Silas stepped closer, boots crunching in the dirt. "You won't make it through the night court." And then it was over. Jed was dragged from his horse, swinging, screaming, fists flailing but powerless against the combined weight of law and community. The sea